Welcome. Wherever you are, welcome. We've come here this day to commit to the preciousness of memory, a life that was mingled with our own. The strength and loveliness of that life remain to bless us. Those whom we love do indeed leave us, and when we lose them, no spoken words can lessen our grief. But what they were can never leave us. The strength of their presence, the gentleness of their sympathy, the warmth of their love. These are ours always, interfused with our thoughts and blended with our lives. No one entering this world can ever escape sadness. Each in turn must bear burdens, though they be rich or poor, and in turn bid loved ones farewell as they set out upon life's ventures. Each one must suffer that sad farewell when loved ones embark on the last voyage, and each in turn must take that final journey. But for those who make this life a pledge to the Spirit, there comes the assurance of a victory that shall redeem life's pain. We have gathered here today to acknowledge the death of Bert Wolfson, whom we have known and loved. When someone we have cared for dies, at whatever age, family and friends gather with sorrow in their hearts. At times when we must face death and loss, we need one another's company for understanding and support. Just to be together, to look into one another's faces, takes away some of our loneliness and draws our hearts together in the healing which we can offer one another. At such times, the various faiths that sustain us separately come together in a harmony that acts across all creeds and assures us of the permanence of human goodness and hope. So we have gathered here today in grief and sorrow, but we have also gathered to celebrate a life. We've come together to give thanks that we knew this remarkable person, this loving father, grandfather, friend, to express our gratitude for the days and years we were able to share with him. We're here to remember and memorialize a rich life, by remembering the best of this person, by recalling some of his finest qualities, by honoring the principles, values, and dreams which guided his life. Some of Bert's enduring nobility flows into us, that we ourselves might be more noble in the days ahead. We're here for all these things, but our first task is to face full and unafraid the reality of this death and the grief and loss we feel.
Hi, my name is Courtney Volton, and I have the greatest honor of being Bert's first grandchild. As I'm sure we all do, I have countless memories and stories to tell of how my life was brightened by having Bert around. But today, I would like to share a poem that he memorized in the 4th grade. And in the following years, he would often break out in poem, reciting it word for word by memory. I believe it conveys a message that shows a lot about his character and his attitude toward life. It's called "It Couldn't Be Done" by Edgar Albert Guest. Somebody said that it couldn't be done, but he, with a chuckle, replied that maybe it couldn't, but he would be one who wouldn't say so till he tried. So he buckled right in with the trace of a grin on his face. If he worried, he hid it. He started to sing as he tackled the thing that couldn't be done, and he did it. Somebody scoffed, "Oh, you'll never do that. At least no one ever has done it." But he took off his coat, and he took off his hat, and the first thing we'd know, he'd begun it. With a lift of his chin and a bit of a grin, without any doubting or quit it, he started to sing as he tackled the thing that couldn't be done, and he did it. There are thousands to tell you it cannot be done. There are thousands to prophesy failure. There are thousands to point out to you, one by one, the dangers that wait to assail you. But just buckle in with a bit of a grin. Just take off your coat and go to it. Just start in to sing as you tackle the thing that cannot be done, and you'll do it. Thank you.
Try to
And now we have remembrances from a number of people, family and friends, who were close to Bert. And you know who you are, I hope.
Good afternoon. My name is Porter Eichel, and it is my great pleasure to share a few of my many happy memories of my good friend Bert. Bert was one of the extraordinary people who came into my life with my equally extraordinary husband, Fritz Janschke. Now, if Fritz were here, he would begin by telling the story of surprising Bert and Lorley as they were making out in the sunroom of the Villanova house when Bert was looking like that middle picture there. But that was before my time, so I'll recount my own memories. As we all know, Bert was an estate attorney without parallel. In that capacity, he was sometimes called upon to serve as the executor of a client's estate. Now that involved, among other things, the tedious, thankless task of getting rid of all the stuff that the beneficiaries hadn't claimed and certainly didn't want. In some of those cases, Bert's friends became the unintended beneficiaries. There was one colorful client who died by, I'll just say, nefarious means, leaving behind warehouses full of valuables. Among these were cases of vintage wine that he had purchased at Sherry's, the now defunct wine and spirit emporium in New York. They were stored in the fabled Sherry's wine cellars that were in the Jamaica section of Queens. Now, ever the good steward of his client's estate, Bert became concerned when Sherry's was threatened with eviction for failing to pay rent on those cellars. So he got in his car, drove up to Queens, packed up all of those cases of wine, and brought them back to Ardmore. Well, years passed, the wine was gathering dust, so Bert decided to open the bottles for special occasions with friends. Fritz and I enjoyed many of those bottles, including the last one, which Bert and Lorley shared with us shortly before we moved to North Carolina. And then there was the client who owned a tool and die manufacturing plant in North Philadelphia. He left behind a basement full of boxes filled with wooden forms that were used to make those tool and die molds. Bert knew exactly what to do with those. He taped up those boxes and printed out mail labels made out to Fritz Janschke, 707 Simpson Street, Greensboro. The day Fritz got those was Christmas in July, or whatever month it was. Those forms became the raw material of countless sculptures. I have two, which I look at every day, fondly remembering those two creative spirits, Fritz and his collaborator, Bert.
Hi, everybody. My sister's laughing at me in the front row. A lot of you knew my grandfather as an attorney, honorary member of the Women's Club, president of the Beaumont Wine Committee, and many more varying titles. I wanted to take the time to share with you who he was outside of those things, starting with the fact that we only ever called him Bert because Grandpa made him feel like an old person. A couple years ago, while talking to him on the phone, Bert gave me some grandfatherly advice. He told me, if you ever forget that you're a child, you're in deep blank. I'll let you fill that in. After hearing this, I realized that he'd been exemplifying this motto with every conversation we had and every adventure that we went on. My favorite example of this would be when we would pick up Bert and Lorley from the airport. He would climb into the back of our minivan, sit in the third row,
squeezed in between me and my sister. We'd both take off our shoes and hold up our feet so that Bert could grab our big toes and marry them in the most beautiful wedding ceremony you've ever seen. My sister and I would always be in endless laughter by the end of the ceremony, and our toes have lived happily ever after. No matter where we were, whether it was Beaumont, his office, or the store, he was always excited and eager to introduce me to everyone he knew. I have countless memories of hearing, "Hi, Joe, have you met my granddaughter Lauren?" Or, "Hey, this is my granddaughter Lauren." And the fact that he wanted everyone he knew to know me made me feel special and important every single time this happened. And when he would say it, I could see in his face and in his eyes how proud he was to have me as his granddaughter. For many years, I would spend my summers traveling up to Philly to visit them by myself, feeling like a big girl. And during these trips, we would all brush our teeth, get in our pajamas, and then I would plop right between them in their bed so that we could all read together before going to sleep. We kept this tradition going, Bert and I, even after my grandmother passed. And we did so even till my last visit in April. And I'm 23, so let's keep the age in mind. He and I would climb into bed and we'd cuddle together and we'd read our books, and we usually ended up talking about life or whatever intellectual book he was reading, because it was always intellectual. And no matter how old I got, I always cherished these moments because it's the feeling of being a young girl and having your grandfather and getting to snuggle up close and tight. And I never had to grow up or adult to, be too old for that, I guess. I'm so thankful for every lesson he taught me and every memory that we created together. Each of these has contributed to the woman that I am today. He is a constant inspiration to enjoy life. Sorry, one second. To enjoy life, live it to the fullest, and love everything that you do. He is my best friend. Sorry, guys. I'm forever grateful and honored to have been able to call him my grandpa and my friend. Thank you all sincerely for coming to celebrate his amazing life with us. And I know that he would be very excited that we're all going to continue and keep his spirit of play every single day. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lydia. I'm the fourth granddaughter. So I'd like to start with a meaningful anecdote and some self-disclosure. So for a while, I wasn't sure whether Bert knew I was bisexual until a meaningful phone call I had with him about a year ago. We were discussing my classes at NYU, and he asked if they discussed queer history and rights. I said, absolutely, it's Manhattan. Explained the many ways that queer issues had been discussed and honored in my courses. And then I was touched when suddenly, to my surprise, the conversation turned from academic to deeply personal. He said, good, I've been worried about you, and I'm so glad you haven't faced any discrimination. Unlike the experience of so many, there was absolutely no question as to whether or not my 93-year-old grandfather would support and accept me. His only concern was making sure I was safe and respected by others. This is such an incredible gift that I will always be thankful for. Today, many of us have been discussing Bert's passion for learning and devotion to providing his children and grandchildren with the best education possible. This phone conversation made me feel so loved, and it's reflective of the great impact of Bert's intellect and some of the deeper meaning behind his commitment to education, the value he saw in the curriculum. Some people use their intelligence as self-protection, gathering facts to pull out at the dinner table and make an impression. But Bert's passion for learning was intertwined with his love of people and passion for justice. He did not settle for simply knowing. He wanted to understand. He wanted to connect to the world around him, honor the experiences of those who were different from him, and expand his perspective through education and discussion. This commitment to seeking understanding and personal growth was reflected so much in his advice to me. While he always encouraged whatever goals I was currently pursuing, he was also adamant that my potential and possibilities in life went infinitely beyond any one career, interest, or area of life. He used to fondly recall sailing in his youth and described to me the symbolism that made it so fulfilling to him. Bert was always intentional with the way he spent his time and energy in life, constantly pursuing new, meaningful ambitions and making thoughtful decisions to give himself and his loved ones the best opportunities for success. At the same time, truly intentional living requires an acceptance of life's ongoing evolution. Bert encouraged us to celebrate change rather than fear it. He said that while it's great to plan for a meaningful path ahead, the fun of sailing comes from learning to change course when the winds of life inevitably change. I feel I've inherited both Bert's commitment to thoughtful action and living a meaningful life, and his value of ongoing self-growth and heartfelt curiosity. Even in rough waters, Bert had a wonderful sense of humor that has brought so much light to my life. As I continue to navigate life with intellect, curiosity, and care for others, I hope to bring along Bert's playful spirit, integrity, and resilience.
Friends and family, today we gather not only to mourn the passing of my grandfather, but also to celebrate the life he lived, a life that profoundly touched each of us. Growing up, I was fortunate to have a grandpa who not only loved me, but also took the time to impart invaluable life lessons and morals. My grandpa instilled these lessons through example. These lessons would not only address the big things in life, but also the little things. I would call my grandpa and ask about finances and politics, but I would also find myself calling him from Trader Joe's asking him what brie cheese I should buy. When reflecting on these lessons, I observed that he consistently demonstrated 3 outstanding character traits. They will forever represent, my grandfather. These traits I now call the 3 L's, and they are loyalty, laughter, and learning. According to the Oxford Dictionary, loyalty is defined as a strong feeling of support or allegiance. My grandfather showed loyalty in many ways, to his 5 granddaughters, his 2 children, his church, his work, to his town, and really the list could go on. But as I reflect, the one that sticks out to me the most is the loyalty that he showed me. My grandpa always felt that if I had made a choice, it must have been a good one. That demonstrated a deep-seated confidence in my judgment and integrity. And this gives you a confidence that you really never knew that you had. And here's where I signify the first L of the 3 for loyalty. My grandpa had a way of turning even the most solemn moments into a scene from a comedy sketch. Whether it was a family dinner discussion about serious world events or a heartfelt conversation about life's challenges, he had a knack for injecting humor. I remember growing up, I called him the funny man, and I would continuously ask my mom when the funny man was coming to town again. Becoming a little wiser, I was able to connect the dots. The funny man wasn't just the funny man, but he was actually my grandfather. You can imagine how ecstatic I was. As we grow, the complexities of life often start to shape our perspective, but never did my perspective change on what a funny man he was. And with that, we have 2 of the 3 L's, loyalty and laughter. If anyone knows my grandfather, it's that he loves to learn. He taught me that learning didn't always come from textbooks. He taught me that learning equips you with tools and insights necessary to think for yourself. And that was something he felt was very, very vital in this day and age. He always empowered me to form independent opinions and make informed decisions and contribute meaningfully to endeavors. In a letter that my grandpa wrote me back in 2018, and yes, I do keep this letter, he says, as grandparents, Lorley and I have felt that we have obligations to expose you to new experiences in life so that you will always have as much information as you need to make decisions. He stayed true to this philosophy until the day that he died. And that is the final and last L. With this said, his legacy lives on not only in the memories that we hold, but in the values he instilled in each of us. These might be different from person to person. Maybe he helped you prepare your will or identify your beneficiaries, but for me, he taught me how to count to 10, ride a bike, and learn to lead a life that I want. As we bid him farewell today, let us carry forward our lives with everything he spent his life teaching us. Let us honor his life by living ours with the same integrity, dignity, and love. Let us honor his life by guiding other people and providing them with opportunities, just the way he did ours. That is what I plan to do to honor the life of my grandfather. Thank you all so much for being here today.
Hello, I'm Charlotte, the second granddaughter. In my Introduction to Contemplative Studies class in college, the professor asked us, "Who's your champion? Who champions you?" Bert immediately came to my mind. Bert championed my education inside and out of the classroom. He engaged with me on the topics I was reading about in school, like reading the book The Giver when I read it in 6th grade so we could talk about it. When he learned I was planning to study abroad in Buenos Aires in college, he sought out books about Argentine history and news about the current political situation. Talking with him got me over some of the nerves about going. Instead, I was excited to have new experiences and share them with him. In fact, he remained interested in Argentine history and current events. Earlier this year, he passionately explained to me his fears about the new president rolling back the country. I was really touched that he remained engaged in this unique interest of mine. Before and after Argentina, he consistently encouraged me to keep up my Spanish, which I was not doing, and I'm still not doing. Bert and Lorley championed our family by gathering us from distant states. When I think about the family, I think about cousins performing dances at Bert and Lorley's farm and having appetizers on the porch at Mohonk Mountain House, all of us freshly showered and changed for dinner. I wouldn't have the special relationship with my cousins, aunts, uncles today without Bert and Lorley. Bert championed our family history. He was a phenomenal storyteller and delighted in recounting tales to us. Stories of childhood pranks in Pawtucket and at camp, like planting food coloring in chocolates that were being repeatedly stolen, thus turning the thief's pea green, sent me and Lydia into fits of giggles. He was a keeper of Patzau family history. He reminded us of their plight fleeing Vienna for refuge in the United States and how it fit into the socio-political history. I remember fondly the trip Bert, Lorley, Courtney, and I took to Vienna. Talking with cousins and seeing the family home made me feel connected to those stories. Courtney and I laughed that Bert would charge ahead to explore the next destination, and Lorley trailed behind, noticing the details. Courtney and I tried to split the difference. Bert championed my career. In college, when I said I wanted to explore law, he set me up with a summer internship at his firm. He encouraged me to ask questions of the attorneys and learn what their work entailed. A number of years later, when I started working as a paralegal at the Center for Reproductive Rights, Bert engaged me in current issues in the legal field, like Supreme Court politics and reform. He followed the news about abortion law closely. We connected over our strong moral compasses and commitment to civil rights. I will carry with me to law school and in all areas of my life Bert's inquisitiveness and commitment to justice, and I will always think of him as my champion.
Hi, so I'm Kira, Bert's daughter, And the first thing I'm going to read is something from, we have a long-term family friend. Her name is Kathy Suslov, who's joining us from California via YouTube streaming. And she asked us to read something that she wrote on her behalf. As a way of background, when I was in high school, she lived with us in Ardmore on our third-floor apartment for 4 years while she was getting her PhD in art history. And here's what she has to say. Thank you to Rod and Kira for relaying these thoughts on your dear father, Bert Wolfson. When I visited Bert in early June, he was resting at home and at peace with his decisions for the end of life. Although he could not speak clearly, his mind seemed as sharp as ever, and he understood everything that was said to him. He smiled a lot, and he conveyed to us heartfelt feelings about our presence. This brought about a great deal of comfort, which was his very intention. Bert was an expert at many things, legal and practical, but his greatest talent, prompted by an innate curiosity and a true goodness, lay in bringing comfort and support of all kinds to other people. I was the beneficiary of his and Lorley's love and care since 1978. I have never known a more generous and loving couple. Their presence in my life at their home, where I lived for 4 years, and during later vacations and visits, continued until Lorley's death just a few years ago. Like so many others, I admired Bert's advice, his awesome sense of humor, and his gorgeous vocabulary at the ready for any situation. Bert was a learned and serious lawyer whose pro bono work was copious and helpful to individuals and organizations alike. Over the many years that I knew him, Bert had always read more books and book reviews than anyone else, with the result that he could talk knowledgeably about any topic that might come up, making him an outstanding conversationalist and interlocutor, a role that he relished at the Wolfson dinner table. As I completed my PhD, I worked in his Philadelphia office as a paralegal for 1 summer. His clients always left his office with a smile on their face, even after consultation on death and taxes. Bert's generous and vibrant spirit so often brought me and others strength and solace in times of need. I am forever grateful for having been a part of his life and for the continuing friendship of Kira and Rod. Thank you, Kathy. So now I'd like to read you something from myself. I consider myself so lucky to have been Bert's daughter, his favorite daughter, as he would often tell me, quickly followed up by, well, my only daughter. While many of my friends were having upsets with their dad or running away from home and coming to our house, I had a different experience. I considered my dad my friend, my mentor, someone I could trust and turn to in time of need. Conversely, what his friends would complain about their children was exactly what my dad enjoyed and admired in our relationship, that we were always in communication. Even when we disagreed, or he was annoyed at me by having to explain something twice, when we were far away from each other or had tough subjects to address, we were always able to talk. And this was the case down to the very last day we were together. And I just want to add here, to all his caregivers and to Naomi, I was so incredibly touched to see the love and the communication that happened between Dad and them during his final days. Thank you so much. Anyone that knew my dad knew that he was a passionate man. In addition to being a highly competent estate attorney, he was also passionate about many other areas, such as the books he read, equality, and politics. But did you know that he was also very passionate about cumin seeds on eggs for breakfast? Waffles with a lot of syrup? Frank Cooper's vintage orange marmalade extra coarse cut, which he bought by the case? The New York Review of Books? exotic spices and trying new recipes, roasted chestnuts, and of course his 5 granddaughters. This is part of what I admired so much. If he thought it or believed it, you would know about it. You would know why you should be passionate about it too. And he would have very compelling reasoning to back it all up. I think this is part of the reason that we all felt like we knew my dad so well. My dad often saw things a bit differently than others. He had a great imagination. He first would have the vision of what he wanted, and then he would work backwards on how to make that a reality. This included creating new winter fun at our family farm by taking long pieces of leftover wood from the barn, making them into a cross, and then stapling large plastic sheets to the cross so my friends and I could use it as a sail to push us while we were on ice skates across the entire length of the frozen-over pond, harnessing the wind. My dad had an incredible sense of humor. I never knew if he was having more fun or me. When I was young, he would help my friend and I dress up in his old suits, and he'd cut holes where we needed them and shorten the legs so that we could pretend to play with costumes. He would play jacks with me and try to gather up all the jacks by throwing the ball way up into the cathedral ceilings of our house so he had ample time to gather all the jacks. He would play games where he pretended to be a jukebox, and my friends and I would try and stump the jukebox. Thus came his nickname, Mr. Wrong Song. He not only let us use, but he encouraged us to use the large living room couch pillows as sleds, which we would sit on and ride down the long, smooth, polished wooden staircase at our house. This gave us hours of entertainment. And he continued in this fashion with my children. They couldn't wait to pick him up at the airport, as you've heard. And he would climb way into the back, as he always did, of our van, and the fun would begin, and it wouldn't end until we dropped him back at the airport. When helping me with the girls after dinner, instead of reading them a quiet bedtime story, he would play silly games that would wind them up rather than calming them down. But boy, were they having fun. He always made life fun, and it didn't matter where we were. My dad was also a great storyteller, as you've heard. Many of you probably know this about him, but as a child at bedtime, he would tell me stories of Mabel, who was an imaginary rabbit that lived inside a long, hollow log in our backyard. And she had unlimited adventures that my dad would conjure up every night. And to my surprise, somehow I was always in the middle of Mabel's adventures. Then, in high school, he helped me to do my difficult English homework, sometimes way more than he should have been. My dad led by example and lived following closely to his own moral code. One thing I am most thankful for him teaching me is to stay positive and to stay in the game and always look for the lesson or bright side, even in adversity. I remember one summer I was pretty sure I was going to fail a summer school class I was taking on the history of technology. A class he'd encouraged me to take, really probably more because he thought it would be interesting, but I signed up anyway. In my panic, he encouraged me to go in and talk to my professor and work through whatever I wasn't getting, to confront my shortcomings or difficulties rather than to run from them. And this worked out really well. I not only ended up with an A in the class, but I ended up with a tremendous amount of self-confidence rather than disappointment. Dad taught me to think for myself. I think, Rod, you'd probably agree. One way he did this was that we didn't have many rules that we robotically had to follow as children and later revolt against. In my adult years, Dad was always happy to tell people that he didn't feel he needed to give us rules to follow, but instead just expected us to do the right thing. He wanted us to consider what is the right thing to do. He was lucky that most of the time we did do the right thing. Dad and I both learned that sometimes, though, it did lead to differences, but we were always able to talk about our viewpoints. Another thing I always admired was how he viewed his purpose as an estate attorney. He chose not to get lost in all the paperwork, but to focus on his clients. His challenge and his enjoyment was to find out what effect they wanted to create via their estate or legacy, what they were very passionate about, and what made them get excited. He saw that his job was to use the law to help them create just that effect. I always admired this, as purpose is what really gives one drive in life. I love that by fulfilling his purpose, he had his clients also inspect theirs. Dad made sure he was part of my life. When I moved away, he and Mom would visit me regularly. And when I started to have kids, they came to visit like clockwork every 3 months. I mean, come on, who does that? This ensured that we stayed close and a part of each other's life. And like I said, he set the bar really high. In looking back at who my dad was, I gotta say, it seemed like he never had a bad day. I don't recall him getting mad or punishing me, even when I ended up in trouble after a Hall & Oates concert at the Tower Theater in Philadelphia. Everything Dad did was to help Rod and I be able to think for ourselves, to be successful, have a good work ethic, and to be independent. Dad set the bar high for all of us. And while reflecting on that, although I miss him immensely and often wish I could call him, I realized that in the few weeks since his passing, I have found myself feeling empowered to grow, to be more independent, and to be someone that I can be proud of. I wondered if something was wrong, that I wasn't lost or wallowing without him. I even felt a bit guilty about that. But I realized something. I was carrying forward the essence of my dad. I believe that this is how he saw things. He believed that he lived on in all the positive ways that he impacted each of our lives. And to that degree, I feel proud and fulfilled that he is very much successfully living on. Thank you.
I invite you now to share a brief memory, happy or sad, with humor and love, brief memory of Bert. Please raise your hand if you would like to speak, and a microphone will be brought to you.
I'm Doug Ross, and I had the privilege of meeting Bert and Laura Lee and Kira and Rod in 1966 when I got to babysit for them. So I'm going to open this remembrance with a little song, the first verse. Raindrops keep falling from my head. That doesn't mean my eyes will soon be turning red. Dee-do-dee-do-dee, crying's not for me. This is on the tape recorder that they were playing with, probably the second or first time I babysat with them. And we had so much fun. And Bert and Lorelei became like the guardian angels, like so many others of you. And they helped my wife and Geraldine and I when we first got married and we had nothing. They lent us their car, they helped me find an apartment. I mean, I can just go on. And it just kept on going. And then I'm so happy that I got to teach Charlotte and co-teach Lydia a little bit, and it's so great to see you all again and be here and celebrate the wonderful life of your dad and your mom too. And Mietta, also, we got to know Kim and Mark, and swim with you and play with you too.
And my name's Amy Davis, and I never could call him Bert. I grew up calling him Mr. Wolfson, and I grew up calling Lorelei Mrs. Wolfson, and they were a big part of my childhood, and even as I got older, and the couple of things that I really stick out for me were there was an Easter egg hunt at that place in Ardmore. There were eggs all over the place, and probably a bunch of them in Mabel's little log. And and then most recently, I'd have to say, there was an excursion to the farm, and it was in 2019, before we had the COVID, and I went with two old men, Mr. Wolfson and Owen Owens, and we drove to the Endless Mountains to spend the weekend, or it was the 4th of July weekend at the farm, and to go to the parade in Montrose. And I remember Mr. Wolfson insisted driving to the parade site, wherever it was, I can't remember, and well, it was Montrose. And we all got out of the car, and I turned, and I could hear the car's motor running, and I said, Mr. Wolfson, Bert. He would say, Bert. Call me Bert. He said, Mr. Wolfson, the motor's still running in the car. So he had to go, and he turned it off. And of course, we had such a lovely visit there, and I'll tell you, he didn't like my coffee. I just didn't put enough scoops in the pot. So after that, he made the coffee every morning. And he did especially like the pickles I brought. I brought a jar of Jake and Amos bread and butter pickles or something like that. I don't know what possessed me to do that, but I brought those, and he really liked those. So sometime later, I got him a jar of those. And supportive, yes. He supported me when pretty much my mother didn't, and he was very good friends with my mother. And before, when my father was still out here, he was friends with him. And she didn't want me to buy a house, and he's, yeah, you should buy a house. And I did buy a house, and it's out in Oxford, and it's in the country, and I love that farm so much. And I guess from being there and as a child, the country life was for me. And I'm still out there. I've been there 14 years. So he'll be missed, and I'm so happy to see you, and thank you, girls, for your lovely memories. And, the one thing, the turkey story had me rolling. They were Owen, my mother, and Bert and Lorelei at the house, and he told this story about these wild turkeys that he came up upon on the road, and he couldn't get he couldn't get out of the car, and they were like attacking, and it's the funniest story I've ever heard. I was laughing so hard. So, yeah, he was a good guy, and I'll always call him Mr. Wolfson.
My name is Mickey Edgerton, and I've known Bert for about 60 years. We were both on the board of the Fair Housing Council of Delaware Valley that began back in the early 60s. And we've been friends ever since then. We celebrated our birthdays together every year. I was 6 months older than him. And one of my favorite memories of Bert was a time when a mutual friend of ours and I were at the Museum of Art in Philadelphia and came across Bert and Lorley. And so Julia and Lorley sat down and chatted, and Bert and I stood there talking with each other. And my friend Julia later told me that Lorley said, "Look at those two. They look like brother and sister." And then she said, "And they sound like brother and sister." And so, because we really, whenever we were together, whatever it was we were talking about, we were really into it. And we stayed close all these years. And I didn't know the phrase back then, but now I do, the brother from another mother. And that is so characteristic of our relationship with each other. And of course, what I've heard already here, and I'll hear more of this, I think most all of us felt like we were his favorite. You know, and I've learned since then that, of course, that isn't true. He had a lot of favorites, but it still feels like that. And instead of being jealous of all the rest of you, it makes me so happy to hear all the stories about how you loved Bert, how he loved you, how important you were to him, and how important he is to you. So fortunately, I've lived long enough to realize that the more love, the more love. And that's all good. So it's so wonderful to be here with so many people who loved him and who will always love him, and Lorley. And now we get to see each other's faces and to know, even if we don't, each of us get to talk to each of us, and we probably won't, there's a bond already found, already being founded between us. And that makes me very happy. So as with other memorial services I've been to, but especially this one, I come away with more of Bert than I came in with. And I had a pretty much a lot with him already. So thank you all so much.
My name is Barbara Romaine. My husband and I have been fortunate enough to have known Bert and Lorley and are very grateful that we did. And my story will be brief. I think very much to the point of whom we all know Bert to have been. This is after the death of Lorley, whose loss he endured with such dignity and grace after their 65 amazing years together. I visited him at Beaumont. My husband wasn't able to come on that occasion. I know that many people here must know that Bert presided for some period of time over the book club at Beaumont. Big surprise, right? And there weren't many men in the book club. In fact, I think at a certain point he was the only one. Maybe he was the only one for quite a while. And I visited him, and he was telling me all about it and how difficult it was, for whatever reason, to recruit men to the book club. And he said that the women with whom he spent so much time in literary pursuits, and he told me this with such delight, they had declared him an honorary woman. And the way that he looked at me and the way that he said that were so Bert. And I will never forget those words and the way that he said them to me, and they are just among the many things for which I love him and will always love him and appreciate him, as I know everyone here did and does. Thank you so much for all the kind and loving words about Bert and Lorelei too. We miss them, and we will always miss them. And we send our great condolences to the family. Thank you.
My name is John Smith, and my wife Susan and I joined the congregation here at Mainline Unitarian in 1980. I was a relatively younger lawyer at that time, and Bert was my senior, and was someone that I came to know as an object to admire and to follow. He represented my profession in the most marvelous way and made me feel proud to be a lawyer myself. But there's one other aspect that hasn't been mentioned yet about Bert and Lorelei, for that matter, and that is their appetite for old furniture. And that was in connection with their participation in the Nationalities Service Center, which was an organization that looked after newly arrived immigrants here in the Philadelphia area, many of whom arrived with nothing at all. And to the extent that they had some place to go, they always needed some sort of furniture. And so Bert and Lorelei became a used furniture market. And they would frequently say, if you have an old couch, you have a table, bring it, and we'll take care of it and put it to good use. And they did that for years. Wonderful.
Hi, my name is Mary Darby. I was one of Bert's caregivers, but I never felt like a caregiver. You know, Bert was always warm, always inviting, always giving, and I have been a recipient of his giving many times, and please don't try to refuse, because he does it anyway, you know? He was just a warm, you know, just a beautiful person with great character, integrity. He loved to talk. We had lots of conversations, and so the environment really didn't feel like I was working. And so I am so glad to hear all these wonderful memories. I'm glad that I was able to share a small portion of his life with him, and he would always be remembered. Thank you.
Thank you all. There'll be more opportunities in the reception to continue the conversation, and let the family go out first. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. I have to read my script here. Sing.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom
Life is worth the living. It is good and it is beautiful, in spite of the tragedy with which it is forever beset. We glory in life undergirded by the faith that its goodness is pervasive, that is part of the texture of life, that is of the essence of the nature of things. This is a profound faith, this confidence in life, more profound than we perhaps suspect, because it stands upon faith and faith alone. There's no proof for it, no objective text to support it, except the living of life itself. But this is perhaps the best test of all. And so we go on, those who have known sorrow and those who have not, strong in the faith that life is somehow good, even though we do not always understand it. We go on, no matter what befalls us, doing the right, following the true and the good. We go on, living the life we are given to live, knowing that it is a good life, however difficult it may at times seem to be. And in so living, we shall find that our faith is not false faith, that life is good to those who live in it with serenity and fortitude. Thank you very much. Now we can move on.